My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Madison as I was helping my 6-year-old daughter Emma with her homework. Meet us at Bellacourt tonight at 7. Time to celebrate your big promotion. I stared at the screen, confusion washing over me. What promotion? 3 weeks ago, I had been passed over for the senior software engineer position at my company. The job went to someone with half my experience but twice the connections. I hadn't told my family about the rejection because I knew how disappointed they would be. My wife Sarah looked over my shoulder and frowned. "This feels like a setup, Rocco," she warned. But I decided to go anyway, hoping for a peaceful family dinner. The moment I walked into the upscale restaurant, Madison's voice boomed across the dining room. "There he is, our family success story." She gestured dramatically toward a table packed with 12 relatives I had no idea were coming. The sight that greeted me at Bellacourt made my stomach drop. What I had expected to be a small family dinner had morphed into something resembling a corporate banquet. My parents Frank and Dorothy sat at the head of an extended table, beaming with pride. Madison had positioned herself like a master of ceremonies, her husband Trevor nodding approvingly beside her. My brother Jake was there with his girlfriend Amber, both already working on what appeared to be their second round of drinks. But the real shock came from seeing cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, Marcus and his wife Lisa Stephanie, with her husband Brad, even my second cousin Danny, who I remembered as the kid who used to steal candy at family reunions. Rocco Madison called out loud enough for surrounding tables to hear. "We've been waiting for you." I took the liberty of ordering some appetizers and wine to get started. "I knew you wouldn't mind considering your big news." I made my way to the table, Sarah close behind with our children Emma and 8-year-old Noah. The restaurant was clearly upscale, the kind of place where servers wore crisp white shirts and the menu prices made you do double takes. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over linen tablecloths, and the soft murmur of sophisticated conversation filled the air. "Madison," I said quietly as I took my seat. "What's all this about I didn't tell anyone about any promotion?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, don't be modest. Mother heard from the Johnsons that you're making serious money now. They said their daughter works at your company and mentioned you got promoted to some big technical position." My father Frank leaned forward, his weathered face creased with satisfaction. "About time, son. I always knew you had it in you. Your mother and I have been telling everyone how proud we are." I felt Sarah's hand squeeze mine under the table. She could sense the trap closing around us. "Actually, Dad, there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't get that promotion. In fact, I was passed over for it 3 weeks ago." Frank's expression darkened slightly. "Don't be modest, Rocco. Your mother heard it straight from reliable sources. There's no need to downplay your success." Before I could respond, Madison stood up and clinked her wine glass with a butter knife. Everyone, let me have your attention." The entire restaurant seemed to quiet down as she prepared to make an announcement. "I want to take a moment to celebrate my incredible brother Rocco, who just landed a major promotion at his tech company. He's always been the smart one in the family, and now he's finally getting the recognition he deserves." Applause erupted from our table, and I noticed several nearby diners turning to look at us with polite smiles. My face burned with embarrassment as Madison continued her impromptu speech. And being the generous person he is, Rocco insisted on treating his entire family to dinner at one of Chicago's finest restaurants. "So everyone order whatever your heart desires. Tonight money is no object." The waiter appeared at Madison's elbow as if summoned by magic. He was a distinguished man in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of professional demeanor that spoke of years serving wealthy clientele. "Excellent," he said with a practiced smile. "I have the wine selection your sister requested when she called to make the reservation. 3 bottles of our premium Barolo Reserve at $800 each." My head spun. $2,400 just for wine, and we hadn't even ordered food yet. Sarah's grip on my hand tightened as she processed the same numbers. Madison, I said, trying to keep my voice level, we need to talk privately. But she was already deep in conversation with cousin Marcus about the wine selection. Oh, Rocco knows his wines, she was saying. He's developed quite sophisticated tastes since his promotion. Haven't you, brother? Trevor chimed in with his nasal voice. Madison told me you're practically running the whole tech department now. That must come with a pretty substantial salary increase. I looked around the table at faces filled with expectation and excitement. These weren't bad people. They were family members who had struggled financially for years, who had watched me go to college and build a career while they worked blue-collar jobs or raised children on tight budgets. In their minds, my supposed success was finally their chance to experience something luxurious. But the reality was crushing. My actual salary as a regular software engineer was comfortable but modest. Sarah and I had been carefully budgeting to pay off medical bills from Emma's asthma treatments earlier that year. We drove a used Honda Accord and lived in a small 3-bedroom house in a middle-class suburb. We were responsible with money, but we certainly weren't wealthy. The waiter returned with the wine bottles, each one presented with ceremonial flair. The labels were elegantly designed, and I could practically feel the dollar signs adding up with each cork that was pulled. Madison had orchestrated this entire evening without consulting me, and now I was trapped in front of my entire extended family. The first course will be our signature antipasti selection, the waiter announced. Your sister specially requested our premium arrangement with imported prosciutto-aged cheeses and fresh seafood. It's an additional $40 per person. Madison beamed. I knew Rocco would want only the best for his family celebration. As plates of beautifully arranged appetizers arrived, I realized this wasn't just about a free meal. Madison was using my supposed promotion as a way to show off to elevate her own status by association. She wanted to be the sister of the successful brother, the one who could call expensive restaurants and arrange lavish celebrations. The performance was as much for her own ego as it was for the family's enjoyment. But the most shocking moment came when Madison stood up again and addressed not just our table, but the entire dining room. Excuse me, everyone, she called out, her voice carrying across the restaurant. I just want to share some wonderful news. My brother here, she pointed directly at me, just became a tech millionaire with his new promotion. He's treating his entire family tonight, and he's the kind of man who believes in sharing his success. A real inspiration to us all. The restaurant erupted in polite applause from strangers who had no idea they were witnessing an elaborate fiction. Other diners raised their wine glasses in our direction, smiling warmly at what they perceived to be a heartwarming family celebration. I felt completely exposed like a fraud sitting at the center of a lie I had never agreed to tell. The applause from strangers still rang in my ears as Madison settled back into her chair with a satisfied smile. She had just announced to a room full of people that I was a millionaire, and now there was no taking it back. The weight of expectations pressed down on me like a physical force. Now that we've got the celebration started properly, Madison continued, let's really make this a night to remember. She signaled the waiter again. Bring us your finest menu selections. I want to see the Wagyu beef, the lobster tails, maybe some of that premium seafood tower I saw being served earlier. Cousin Marcus rubbed his hands together eagerly. I've never had real Wagyu before. This is incredible, Rocco. Finally, someone in the family made it big. Actually, his wife Lisa chimed in. Let's make it 2 entrees each. I mean, when else are we going to get an opportunity like this? My brother Jake laughed and slapped me on the back. Remember when we used to split a pizza 3 ways because we couldn't afford our own? Look at you now, big shot. The waiter returned with leather-bound menus that contained no prices, always a dangerous sign. As family members flipped through pages describing dry aged steaks, fresh Pacific lobster, and imported delicacies, I felt my anxiety building. Each item they pointed to enthusiastically represented another $50 to $100 added to a bill that was already spiraling beyond my control. I think I need some air, I told Sarah quietly. Will you watch the kids for a minute? I excused myself from the table and walked toward the restroom, but instead I stepped outside into the cool Chicago evening. The contrast between the warm, expensive atmosphere inside and the reality of the street was jarring. I pulled out my phone and called my bank's automated system to check my checking account balance. The mechanical voice confirmed what I already knew, $1,237. With my credit cards nearly maxed out from Emma's medical expenses, I was looking at potential financial disaster. When I returned to the table, Madison pulled me aside near the hostess station. There you are. I was starting to worry you got cold feet about treating everyone. Madison, we need to talk seriously. I didn't get promoted. I was actually passed over for that position 3 weeks ago. The person who got it has half my experience and makes connections through her father, who works in the industry. I can't afford to pay for dinner for 12 people at a restaurant like this. Her expression shifted from confusion to something resembling annoyance. What do you mean you didn't get promoted? I already told everyone you're successful now. You can't embarrass me like this. Embarrass you? I never agreed to any of this. You arranged this entire dinner without asking me. Well, you're here, aren't you? Look, I understand you might be nervous about spending money, but you can't humiliate our family because you're worried about a credit card bill. Just put it on multiple cards if you have to. I stared at my sister in disbelief. Madison, I don't think you understand. Sarah and I have been paying off medical bills. We budget carefully for groceries and gas. I can't just drop thousands of dollars on dinner. My father, Frank, had apparently overheard part of our conversation because he approached us with a stern expression. Rocco, what's this about? Your mother has been bragging to the entire neighborhood about your success. Mrs. Peterson next door specifically asked when we were going to have a celebration dinner. Are you going to humiliate this family because you're worried about money? Dad, I'm trying to explain that there was never any promotion. Madison misunderstood something. Frank's voice grew harder. Son, I've worked construction for 35 years. I've never had the opportunities you've had with your education and your office job. If you finally made it, the least you can do is share it with the people who supported you. Don't be selfish now that you've got success. I felt trapped between my father's disappointment and my sister's expectations. Meanwhile, Sarah had discovered something that made the situation even worse. She approached us with a concerned expression and pulled me aside. Rocco, I need to tell you something. Madison called me last week asking about your new salary and whether you had mentioned buying a vacation home or a new car. When I told her there was no promotion and no salary increase, she seemed frustrated and said she must have misunderstood something. But apparently, she went ahead with planning this dinner anyway. My heart sank as I processed this information. Madison had known there was no promotion, yet she had orchestrated this entire evening anyway. This wasn't a misunderstanding, this was a deliberate setup. I returned to the table to find that Jake had taken it upon himself to invite additional guests. Rocco, great news. I called my buddy David and his girlfriend Jessica from work. They're going to join us for the main course. I told them my brother's treating everyone and they couldn't believe it. They should be here in about 20 minutes. Jake, I never agreed to pay for additional people. Come on, man. What's 2 more meals when you're already buying for the whole family? Besides, they're going to bring some friends from their office who want to meet the family success story. Before I could object, Cousin Marcus stood up with his wine glass raised. I want to make a toast to Rocco, who went from sharing ramen noodles in college to owning half of Silicon Valley. The table erupted in laughter and applause. Other diners looked over with warm smiles, clearly enjoying the family celebration they were witnessing. But Marcus wasn't finished. You know what, Rocco? We should make this a regular thing. Maybe once a month we could meet at a nice restaurant like this. Now that you've got serious money, it would be great to stay connected as a family. Stephanie nodded enthusiastically. That's a wonderful idea. We could try different upscale restaurants around the city. I've always wanted to go to that place downtown where they serve the gold flake desserts. My mother Dorothy reached into her purse and pulled out a wrapped gift box. Speaking of celebrating Rocco, I bought you this with money from my savings account. I figured since you can afford it now, you'll reimburse me when you get a chance. She handed me the box, and I could tell from the weight and shape that it was expensive. Inside was a Rolex watch that probably cost more than I made in 2 months. Mom, this is too expensive. I can't accept this. Nonsense. It's a success gift. I already removed the tags and had it engraved with your initials. Consider it an early Christmas present that you'll pay me back for. The trap was closing completely. My family had not only planned an expensive dinner, but had also made purchases and commitments based on my supposed wealth. The waiter approached our table again, this time with a leather folder. Excuse me, but I wanted to confirm the special celebration menu your sister requested when she called to make the reservation. She mentioned you wanted the premium upgrade for all courses, which brings the per-person cost to $630 instead of the standard $460. She said price was no object for such a special family celebration. Madison smiled sweetly at me. I wanted to make sure we had the absolute best experience possible. You understand, don't you? I felt dizzy as I calculated the numbers. 12 people at $630 each, plus tax and tip, plus the wine that had already been opened. We were looking at a bill that would exceed $8,000. But the final shock came when Madison pulled out her phone and showed me a series of screenshots. Oh, and I have some exciting news. I've been planning a surprise for everyone. I booked us a family vacation to Tuscany for next month. 2 weeks in a beautiful villa flights. For everyone, tours of wineries, the whole experience. I figured with your new success, you'd want to treat the family to something really special. She showed me printed confirmation emails and itinerary details. 15 people, first-class flights, luxury accommodations, private tours, and fine dining experiences. The total cost was over $40,000. I had to put down deposits to secure everything, and the full payment is due by Monday. I knew you'd be so excited about giving the family this incredible gift. It's going to be the trip of a lifetime. I stared at the paperwork in complete shock. Madison had not only trapped me into paying for an expensive dinner, but she had also committed me to financing a European vacation that would cost more than my annual salary. The prison of expectations was complete, and I was sitting at its center with my entire family watching to see how generous their newly successful relative would be. I excused myself from the table again, this time heading directly to the men's restroom, where I could think clearly for a moment. The bathroom was as luxurious as the rest of the restaurant, with marble countertops and brass fixtures that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to process the magnitude of what was happening. Taking out my phone, I called my bank again to check both my checking and savings account balances. Checking account $1,237, savings account $3,400. Even if I emptied both accounts completely, I would still be short thousands of dollars for just tonight's dinner, let alone the Italian vacation Madison had booked. I then checked the available credit on my 3 credit cards. The first card had $400 available before hitting the limit. The second had $700. The third had been maxed out entirely during Emma's hospital stay earlier this year. Even combining every available dollar I had access to, I was looking at financial ruin. Sarah appeared in the hallway outside the restroom, looking worried. The kids are asking why everyone seems upset. Emma noticed you look stressed, and Noah wants to know if we're in trouble. We might be, I admitted. Madison has orchestrated something that could bankrupt us. The dinner bill alone is going to be $8,000 or more, and she's also booked a $40,000 family vacation that she expects me to pay for by Monday. Sarah's face went pale. Rocco, our mortgage payment is due next week. We have exactly enough in checking to cover it, plus utilities and groceries. If you pay for this dinner, we won't be able to pay our bills. We returned to the table to find that Jake's friends had indeed arrived, along with 2 additional couples they had brought with them. Our party had grown from 12 people to 18 people, and the new arrivals were already perusing the menu and ordering drinks. There's our host called David Jake's coworker. Jake told us all about your big promotion. This is amazing, man. I've never been to a restaurant this nice. Jake was beaming with pride as he introduced me to the newcomers. Everyone, this is my brother Rocco. He just got promoted to some high-level tech executive position. Basically runs the whole company now. I looked around at the faces of people I had never met who were expecting me to pay for their expensive meals based on lies my brother had told them. The waiter was hovering nearby, clearly overwhelmed by the expanding party and uncertain about how to handle the logistics. Dorothy leaned over and whispered loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "Rocco, dear, make sure you take care of the tip generously. I told Mrs. Henderson from church that our son knows how to treat service staff properly now that he's wealthy." The comment made me realize something terrible. My family hadn't just planned this dinner. They had been advertising my supposed success throughout their social circles. My mother had been bragging to her church friends. My father had apparently told neighbors and coworkers. Jake had invited people from his office. Madison had been spreading the news to anyone who would listen. I was not just trapped into paying for an expensive dinner. I was trapped into maintaining a public fiction that dozens of people now believe to be true. Marcus approached me with a serious expression. "Rocco, I wanted to talk to you about an investment opportunity. Now that you're doing so well, I thought you might be interested in helping me start a small business. Nothing too major, maybe just $20,000 or $30,000 to get a landscaping company off the ground. With your success, it would be a great way to help family." Before I could respond, Stephanie jumped in with her own request. "Actually, since we're talking about investments, Brad and I have been looking at buying a house. We were hoping you might be willing to help with the down payment. Maybe $15,000? We'd pay you back with interest, of course." The requests kept coming. Trevor mentioned a startup idea that needed funding. Lisa talked about her daughter's college tuition. Danny brought up a car repair bill he couldn't afford. It seemed like everyone at the table had arrived with a prepared pitch for how I could share my newfound wealth. Frank stood up and addressed the entire table, his voice carrying the authority of a family patriarch. I want to say how proud Dorothy and I are of Rocco. We raised him to work hard and to remember his family when success came. Tonight is proof that we did something right. He turned to the neighboring tables and spoke loudly enough for everyone in the nearby area to hear. "My son started with nothing, and now he owns a piece of Silicon Valley. He's the kind of man who shares his blessings with the people who supported him. That's what family values look like in America." Other diners nodded approvatively, and a few people actually started clapping again. I felt like I was trapped in a performance where everyone except me knew the script. The waiter appeared with the most expensive bottle of wine I had ever seen. "This is the 1997 Brunello that was specially requested," he announced. $1,200 per bottle, and we're opening 3 of them as requested. Madison clapped her hands together excitedly. "Perfect. I wanted tonight to be truly memorable. Rocco, you're going to love this wine. I read in a magazine that successful executives always celebrate with vintages like this." As the sommelier performed an elaborate wine opening ceremony, I realized that Madison had turned my supposed success into a complete lifestyle fantasy. She wasn't just spending my imaginary money, she was creating an entire identity around my supposed wealth. But the breaking point came when she stood up once again and made an announcement that shattered any remaining illusion that this was a simple family dinner. "Everyone, I have one more surprise. I've been in contact with a journalist from the Chicago Tribune who writes about local success stories. She's going to meet us here for dessert to interview Rocco about his rise from a working-class family to tech executive. The story will run in Sunday's business section with a photo of all of us celebrating together." My blood ran cold. A newspaper interview would make the lie permanent and public in a way that could destroy not just my family relationships, but potentially my actual career if my real employer saw the article. "Madison," I said, standing up abruptly, "I need to speak with you privately right now." but she was already on her phone with the journalist. Yes, we're at Bella Court on North Michigan Avenue. The family celebration is going perfectly. My brother is everything you'd want in a success story. I looked around the table at 18 people who were expecting me to fund their evening at family members who had already made financial commitments based on my supposed wealth, and at strangers who believed they were witnessing a heartwarming tale of American achievement. The web of lies had grown so complex that I could no longer see a way to escape without destroying relationships and reputations that had taken years to build. Sarah caught my eye from across the table. She could see that I was approaching a complete breakdown. Our children were sitting quietly, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. Emma had stopped eating and was watching me with the intuitive worry that children develop when they sense their parents are in distress. The waiter approached with dessert menus and information about after-dinner drinks. The bill was still growing, the expectations were still mounting, and the lies were about to become public record in Chicago's major newspaper. Something inside me finally snapped. I stood up so abruptly that my chair scraped against the marble floor, creating a sound that made several nearby tables turn to look. The entire restaurant seemed to pause as I prepared to address not just my family, but everyone within hearing distance. Stop. I said, my voice carrying more authority than I had ever used with my relatives. Just stop everything right now. Madison looked confused and slightly annoyed. Rocco, what's wrong? The journalist will be here in 20 minutes. You need to get ready for the interview. There will be no interview because there is no promotion. The words came out clear and final. I was not promoted 3 weeks ago. In fact, I was passed over for the position I applied for. A woman named Jennifer Chen got the job instead, despite having less experience because her father works in the industry and made the right connections. The table fell completely silent. Even the new arrivals from Jake's work stopped their conversations to listen. My current salary as a regular software engineer is $68,000 per year. After taxes, health insurance, and retirement contributions, I take home about $4,200 per month. Sarah and I live in a 3-bedroom house with a mortgage payment of $1,800. We drive a used Honda Accord that's 8 years old. We shop at grocery stores with coupons and buy our kids' clothes at discount retailers. Frank's expression was shifting from confusion to embarrassment. Son, what are you talking about? We heard from reliable sources that you got a major promotion. Dad, there were no reliable sources. There was a misunderstanding that Madison turned into an elaborate fantasy. I turned to face my sister directly. Madison, you called Sarah last week and asked about my supposed promotion and salary increase. When she told you there wasn't one, you decided to plan this dinner anyway. Madison's face was flushing red. That's not true. I genuinely thought you had been promoted. When Sarah mentioned you were interviewing for something, I assumed you got it. But even after Sarah clarified that I hadn't gotten the job, you still booked this restaurant. You still invited 12 family members. You still pre-ordered expensive wine and upgraded the menu to $630 per person. And you definitely still booked a $40,000 vacation to Italy without asking me. Sarah stood up and addressed the table with quiet dignity. I never told Madison that Rocco got promoted. When she called me, I explained clearly that he was disappointed about not getting the position he applied for. She either misunderstood deliberately or decided to create a celebration anyway. The revelation created a ripple of uncomfortable murmurs around the table. Family members began looking at each other with confusion and growing embarrassment. The strangers Jake had invited seemed particularly uncomfortable, realizing they had been brought to dinner under false pretenses. Marcus cleared his throat awkwardly. So when you said he was making serious money now? I never said that, I replied. Madison announced it without consulting me. She also told people I bought a vacation home and a new BMW, both of which are completely false. She's been creating an entire fictional version of my life. Trevor looked shocked as he processed this information. But Madison showed me photos of what she said was your new house. Those were probably photos from a real estate website, Sarah said quietly. We live in the same house we've lived in for 6 years. The weight of the situation was becoming clear to everyone at the table. Jake's friends were looking around uncomfortably, clearly wanting to leave. The family members who had made their own financial commitments based on my supposed wealth were beginning to panic. Dorothy spoke up with a trembling voice. But I already bought you that watch. I spent $3,000 from my retirement savings because I thought you could afford to reimburse me. Mom, I never asked you to buy me anything. I can't afford to reimburse you for a $3,000 watch. Lisa looked stricken. Marcus and I already put a deposit down on new furniture because we thought Rocco was going to lend us money for his landscaping business. The confessions kept coming. Stephanie had made a down payment on a house based on my supposed willingness to help with financing. Jake had promised his friends an expensive night out that he couldn't afford. Danny had already spent money he didn't have expecting me to cover his car repairs. But the most devastating revelation came when I pulled out my phone and showed the table my actual bank account balances. This is my checking account, I said, displaying the screen for everyone to see. $1,237. This is my savings account, $3,400. Even if I emptied both accounts completely, I would have less than $5,000 total. The bill for tonight's dinner, with 18 people, at $630 each plus tax tip and the wine Madison ordered, will be over $12,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the background noise of the restaurant seemed to fade as the magnitude of the financial impossibility became clear. Frank was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. Son, are you telling us that you can't afford to pay for this dinner? Dad, I can't afford to pay for my own family's portion of this dinner. If I spent everything I have, I might be able to cover Sarah, Emma, Noah, and myself. But that would leave us unable to pay our mortgage, utilities, or groceries next week. Madison had gone completely pale. But I already told the journalist about the success story. I promised her an inspiring interview about family values and American achievement. Then you'll have to call her and cancel because the story doesn't exist. Trevor stood up abruptly. I need to call the travel agent about that Italy trip. If the deposits were made with my credit card, they were made with mine, Madison admitted quietly. I maxed out our card, assuming Rocco would reimburse everything by Monday. The table erupted in worried conversations as family members began calculating their own financial exposure. But the most shocking moment came when I pulled out my phone and showed Madison something I had discovered while researching the restaurant. Madison! I found something interesting when I looked up this place online. You didn't just randomly choose an expensive restaurant. Bellecourt has been featured in magazines as a place where wealthy executives bring their families for special celebrations. You specifically chose this location because you wanted to recreate a lifestyle you've seen in media. She looked defiant despite being caught. So what? You deserved a nice celebration when you got promoted. But I never got promoted. You created an entire elaborate fiction and then built a celebration around it. This wasn't about honoring my success. This was about you wanting to experience what you think wealth looks like. Sarah had been quietly observing the conversation, but now she spoke up with information that changed everything. There's something else everyone needs to know. Last month, Madison called me asking detailed questions about our insurance coverage and whether we had life insurance policies. She also asked about the value of our house and whether we had any investments. At the time, I thought she was just making conversation, but now I realize she was evaluating Rocco's overall financial worth. The implication hung heavy in the air. Madison hadn't just misunderstood a promotion. She had been systematically researching my financial situation to determine how much money she could potentially access. But the final revelation came when I discovered something on Madison's phone that she had left unlocked on the table. I picked it up and found a group chat thread that made my blood run cold. Everyone needs to see this, I announced, holding up the phone. Madison has a group chat called Rocco Operation with several family members. It shows months of planning for tonight, including strategies for pressuring me into being generous discussions about how to make me feel obligated to pay for everything and detailed plans for expanding the dinner into a larger celebration. I began reading from the messages. Madison wrote, "We need to make sure Rocco feels like the family success story, so he'll want to share his money. I'll arrange for extra people to be there so he can't back out without looking cheap." Trevor responded, "Make sure to order expensive things before he arrives so he can't object." Marcus added, "We should all come up with investment requests so he knows the family needs his help." The evidence was undeniable. This hadn't been a misunderstanding or even wishful thinking. It had been a coordinated effort to manipulate me into spending money I didn't have on people who had planned to take advantage of my supposed generosity. Frank looked devastated as the truth became clear. "Madison, how could you do this to your own brother?" But Madison wasn't ready to give up. "He's lying," she said desperately. "Show them your real bank account, Rocco. Stop pretending to be poor when everyone knows you got that promotion." "Madison," Sarah said quietly, "I was there when he got the phone call telling him he didn't get the job. I watched him cry that night because he felt like he had let our family down. There was never any promotion." The conversation was interrupted when the waiter approached our table looking concerned. "Excuse me, but we need to discuss the bill situation. Several items have already been prepared in the kitchen, and the wine that was opened cannot be returned. Are we going to have any issues with payment this evening?" Every eye at the table turned to me, waiting for my response. 18 people, most of whom I cared about deeply, sitting in an expensive restaurant they couldn't afford, trapped in a lie that had grown beyond anyone's control. I looked at my children who were watching their father navigate the most difficult moment of his adult life. I thought about Sarah, who had supported me through career disappointments and financial struggles without ever asking for more than I could give. I considered my parents who had worked hard their entire lives and deserved honesty from their children. And I made a decision that would change everything. I looked directly at the waiter and spoke with calm confidence. "There's been a significant misunderstanding this evening that I need to resolve. Please give me 30 minutes to handle this situation properly, and then we'll settle the bill according to what each party can actually afford." Madison's eyes widened in alarm. "Rocco, what does that mean exactly?" "It means that I'm going to pay for what my family consumed, and everyone else will need to take responsibility for their own choices." I turned to address the entire table. "I want everyone to understand something clearly. I never agreed to pay for this dinner. I was invited under false pretenses to what I thought would be a small family meal. I will not be financially responsible for decisions I didn't make or expenses I didn't authorize." Frank looked confused and embarrassed. "But son, your mother and I already bragged to people that you were treating the family. How do we explain this?" "Dad, you explain it by telling the truth. Madison created a fiction about my financial success and built an elaborate celebration around it without consulting me. The people you spoke to will understand that there was a miscommunication." I gently took Sarah's hand and spoke to our children. "Emma, Noah, I want you to go with Mom to get some fresh air outside. We'll meet you by the car in a few minutes." As my wife and children prepared to leave, I turned back to the table with a new sense of clarity. I realize that many of you made financial commitments based on information Madison gave you about my supposed wealth. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't create an obligation for me to fund those commitments. Jake's friends were already standing up to leave. David approached me with an apologetic expression. "Man, this is really awkward. Jake told us you were treating everyone, but we can cover our own meals. We didn't mean to put you in a difficult position." "I appreciate that," I replied. "The misunderstanding wasn't your fault." As Jake's co-workers headed toward the front of the restaurant to pay their own bill, I addressed my actual family members. I want everyone to think carefully about what's happened here tonight. Madison didn't just plan an expensive dinner. She created a fictional version of my life and used it to manipulate all of you into participating in something none of us could afford. Marcus looked embarrassed as he processed this information. Rocco, I feel terrible about the business loan request. Madison told us you were looking for investment opportunities to share your success with family. Marcus, the business loan conversation never would have happened if you had known the truth about my actual financial situation. Madison created expectations that were impossible for me to meet. But Madison wasn't ready to accept responsibility. You're all acting like I committed some horrible crime. I made a mistake about the promotion, but everything I did was to bring the family together for a celebration. Rocco is just being selfish because he doesn't want to spend money on the people who supported him. Madison, I said firmly, I have the evidence on your phone showing that this was planned manipulation, not a mistake. You organized a coordinated effort to pressure me into spending money I don't have. I walked over to the waiter, who had been discreetly observing our family drama from a respectful distance. I need to speak with your manager about splitting this bill properly. The restaurant manager appeared within moments, clearly experienced in handling difficult dining situations. He was a professional man in his 40s who had probably seen every possible payment complication over his career. Sir, how can I assist you this evening? I need to pay for exactly 4 meals myself, my wife, and my 2 children. We had the standard menu items without any upgrades or premium additions. Everyone else at this table will need to handle their own portions independently. The manager nodded, understanding. I can absolutely arrange that. Let me calculate the exact amount for your family's meals, plus tax and appropriate tip. While he worked on the calculations, I did something that Madison clearly wasn't expecting. I took out my phone and began documenting everything. I photographed the vacation booking receipts she had shown me earlier. I took screenshots of the group chat messages, planning the dinner manipulation. I recorded a brief video statement explaining the true sequence of events. What are you doing? Madison demanded. I'm protecting myself and my family. If this situation escalates, or if people continue spreading false information about my finances, I want clear evidence of what actually happened. Trevor looked increasingly worried as he processed the implications. Madison, if we can't pay for the Italy trip deposits, we're going to be in serious financial trouble. Don't worry, she said desperately. Rocco will change his mind once he realizes how this affects the whole family. He won't let us suffer because of a misunderstanding. But I'd already made my decision, and I was implementing it systematically. I approached each family member individually to clarify the situation and offer what support I actually could provide. Mom, I can't reimburse you for the watch, but I can help you return it if the store will accept it. The purchase was made under false assumptions about my financial situation. Dad, I know you're embarrassed about what you told the neighbors, but the truth is always better than maintaining a lie. I'm proud of the work I do and the life Sarah and I have built together, even though we're not wealthy. Jake, I understand you wanted to impress your friends, but bringing them to an expensive dinner I never agreed to pay for puts everyone in an impossible situation. Each conversation was difficult but necessary. I was systematically dismantling the web of expectations and obligations that Madison had created around my fictional wealth. The restaurant manager returned with my bill, $496 for my family's portion, including tax and a generous tip. It was expensive by our family's standards, but it was manageable without destroying our monthly budget. As I prepared to settle my portion of the bill, Madison made one final desperate attempt to salvage her plan. Wait, she called out loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Everyone, please. Rocco is just being cautious because he's not used to having money yet. He's worried about appearing wasteful. But we're family, and family takes care of each other. She turned to address the other diners in the restaurant. My brother got a huge promotion, and he's treating his whole family to celebrate. He's just being modest about his success because he's a good person who doesn't want to show off. But this time, instead of playing along with her performance, I responded with calm, clear truth. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, addressing the nearby tables that had been drawn into Madison's narrative, I apologize for the disruption to your evening. My sister has been sharing incorrect information about my career and finances. I was not promoted, I am not wealthy, and I did not agree to pay for this dinner. I hope you understand that family situations can sometimes be complicated. The other diners nodded politely and returned to their own conversations, clearly wanting to distance themselves from our family drama. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. As I prepared to pay my bill and leave with my family, the manager approached me with information that changed everything. Sir, I feel obligated to inform you of something. When your sister called to make this reservation, she specifically requested our most expensive private dining package and asked about arranging media coverage for what she called a wealth celebration. She also inquired about having photographers present to document the evening. This was clearly planned as much more than a simple family dinner. The evidence was overwhelming. Madison had not only manipulated the family into an expensive evening, but she had also attempted to turn my fictional success into a public relations event for her own benefit. And then I discovered something that revealed the true depth of her deception. While she was distracted arguing with Trevor about their credit card bills, I did a quick internet search on my phone for recent mentions of my name or my company. What I found made my blood run cold. Madison had already posted on social media about my supposed promotion. She had shared photos from tonight's dinner with captions about celebrating my millionaire brother and family success story. The posts had been shared by dozens of people and were spreading rapidly through our social networks. But worse than the social media posts was what I found next. Madison had actually contacted local news outlets with a story about my supposed rise from working-class origins to tech executive success. One local blog had already published a preliminary article about local family celebrates tech industry breakthrough, featuring details about tonight's dinner and my fictional career accomplishments. The lie had become public in ways that could potentially impact my actual career and reputation. If my real employer saw these articles claiming I worked for a different company and held a senior position I had never been offered, it could create professional complications that might take months to resolve. I realized that Madison had not just planned an expensive dinner. She had orchestrated a comprehensive campaign to publicly establish my fictional wealth and success, presumably so she could continue accessing what she believed to be my resources. As I stood in that expensive restaurant surrounded by family members who had been manipulated into participating in an elaborate deception, I made the final decision about how to handle the situation. I was going to leave. Not just the restaurant, but the entire web of expectations and obligations that Madison had created. I was going to pay for my family's meal walk out to the car, where Sarah and the children were waiting, and let the remaining people at the table figure out how to handle the consequences of their choices. But I was also going to make sure that everyone understood exactly what had happened and why. I stood up from the table and addressed every person remaining in the dining room. I want to make this completely clear for everyone present, including the staff of this restaurant. I am leaving now to join my wife and children. I will pay exactly $496 for my family's portion of the meal. The remaining balance of approximately $6,330 will need to be handled by the people who ordered those items. Madison's face went completely white. Rocco, you can't be serious. How are we supposed to pay for all this? Madison, you organized this dinner, you invited these people, you ordered the expensive wine and upgraded the menu, and you did all of it without consulting me about my ability or willingness to pay. The financial responsibility belongs to the people who made the decisions. Frank stood up, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Son, you can't leave your family stuck with a bill like this. What kind of man abandons his relatives? Dad. What kind of man lies about his brother's income to trick him into paying for an expensive dinner he never agreed to attend? I'm not abandoning anyone. I'm refusing to be financially responsible for decisions I didn't make. I walked to the front of the restaurant and handed the manager my credit card. $496 for the 4 meals at table 12. Please make sure the receipt clearly shows that this payment covers only those 4 specific meals. As the transaction processed, I could hear urgent conversations behind me at the table. Voices were rising as family members realized they would need to figure out how to cover their portions of an extremely expensive bill they had never budgeted for. Marcus was on his phone trying to contact his bank about emergency credit increases. Stephanie was crying as she calculated how much money she had available across all her accounts. Jake was frantically texting friends, asking if anyone could lend him money immediately. But Madison was becoming desperate in ways that revealed the true depth of her manipulation. She approached the restaurant manager with tears in her eyes. "Sir, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. My brother got promoted to a high-level position, but he's being stubborn about celebrating properly. Could you please call him back over here so we can resolve this?" The manager looked at her with professional sympathy but firm resolve. "Ma'am, the gentleman has paid for his portion and is free to leave. The remaining balance is the responsibility of the people who ordered those items. We need to settle the bill this evening." I signed my receipt and walked toward the exit, but before leaving, I approached the table one final time. I want everyone to understand something. I love this family, but I will not be manipulated into financial decisions that could harm my wife and children. Madison created this situation by lying about my income and planning an elaborate celebration without my consent. The consequences belong to the person who made the decisions. As I reached the restaurant entrance, I heard Madison calling after me desperately. "Rocco, please. You can't let the family suffer because of a misunderstanding. We'll be embarrassed in front of everyone." I turned back to face her. "Madison, this wasn't a misunderstanding. You had evidence that I didn't get promoted, yet you planned this dinner anyway. You created fictional stories about my wealth and spread them throughout the family and community. You organized a coordinated effort to pressure me into paying for things I couldn't afford. This is the natural consequence of those choices." Outside the restaurant, Sarah was waiting by our car with Emma and Noah. The children were quiet, clearly sensing the seriousness of the situation, but not fully understanding its implications. "How did it go?" Sarah asked as we got in the car. "I paid for our family and left everyone else to handle their own portions. It was the only way to make it clear that we won't be manipulated into financial decisions we can't afford." As we drove home, my phone began buzzing with an endless stream of calls and text messages. Madison was calling repeatedly, her voicemails ranging from angry accusations to desperate pleas. Jake sent multiple texts claiming I had abandoned the family and destroyed relationships that took years to build. Marcus left a voicemail saying he was disappointed in my selfishness and couldn't believe how money had changed me. But the most devastating call came from my mother, Dorothy. "Rocco, honey, you need to come back and fix this situation. Madison is crying and your father is angrier than I've ever seen him. The restaurant is threatening to call the police if someone doesn't pay the bill. Please don't let our family fall apart over money." I listened to the voicemail with Sarah sitting beside me, and we both understood the magnitude of what was happening. Our extended family was experiencing a crisis that could permanently damage relationships, all because Madison had built an elaborate fiction around my supposed success. "Should we go back?" Sarah asked quietly. "If we go back and pay that bill, we're teaching everyone that manipulation works. We're also putting our own family at financial risk for the sake of avoiding temporary embarrassment." 20 minutes after we left the restaurant, I received a phone call that changed everything. The restaurant manager was calling my cell phone. "Sir, I wanted to inform you of the situation here. The remaining members of your party are unable to cover the bill. Several credit cards have been declined, and the total amount owed is beyond what they can pay this evening. We're going to need to involve law enforcement if the bill isn't settled soon. I understand, I replied. I paid for my family's portion in full. The remaining balance is not my responsibility. I respect that, sir, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to reconsider before we take further action. After I hung up Sarah and I discussed our options, we could return to the restaurant and rescue everyone by paying a bill that would devastate our family budget. We could try to negotiate some kind of payment plan that would still leave us financially strained for months. Or we could maintain our position and allow our relatives to face the natural consequences of their decisions. What do you think the children would learn if we went back and paid? Sarah asked. They'd learn that other people can make expensive decisions for our family without our consent, and we'll always rescue them from the consequences. And what will they learn if we don't go back? They'll learn that our family makes financial decisions carefully and that we don't allow other people to control our budget through guilt or manipulation. We were still discussing the situation when my phone rang again. This time it was Madison, and her voice was different than I had ever heard it. She was genuinely panicking. Rocco, you have to help us. They're saying they're going to call the police for dining and dashing. Trevor's credit card was declined and mine is maxed out. Marcus doesn't have anywhere near enough money and Jake is in the same situation. Dad tried to put it on his card, but his limit is only $2,000. We're going to be arrested if someone doesn't pay this bill. Madison, you created this situation by planning an expensive dinner that none of us could afford. I told you clearly that I wasn't promoted and couldn't pay for everyone. But I thought you were just being modest. I didn't realize how serious the financial situation was. You had evidence that there was no promotion. You chose to plan the dinner anyway because you wanted to experience what you thought wealth looked like. These are the consequences of that decision. The phone went quiet for a long moment before Madison spoke again, her voice barely above a whisper. Rocco, they're calling the police now. The manager said we have 10 minutes to settle the bill or they're filing charges for theft of services. Please, I'm begging you. I'll pay you back somehow. I'll get a second job. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at Sarah, who could hear Madison's voice through the phone. Our children were listening from the back seat, old enough to understand that something serious was happening to their extended family. But the final call came 30 minutes later from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, it was a police officer. Is this Rocco Thompson? I'm Officer Williams with the Chicago Police Department. I'm calling regarding an incident at Bellecourt Restaurant involving members of your family. Several individuals are claiming that you agreed to pay for their meal but left without settling the bill. Can you clarify the situation for me? I explained the entire sequence of events to the officer, including Madison's deception about my promotion, the manipulation tactics revealed in the group chat, and my decision to pay only for my family's portion of the meal. So you're saying you never agreed to pay for the other parties? That's correct, officer. I was invited to what I believed would be a small family dinner, but arrived to find 12 additional people and pre-ordered expensive items that I had never authorized or agreed to pay for. And you did pay for your own family's portion? Yes, sir. $496, including tax and tip. I have the receipt. Thank you for clarifying, Mr. Thompson. Based on what you've told me, there's no legal obligation for you to pay for meals you didn't order or authorize. The restaurant will need to work out payment arrangements with the individuals who actually consumed the items. After the officer hung up, I realized that my family's ordeal was far from over. The financial crisis at the restaurant was just the beginning of what would likely be months or years of damaged relationships and difficult conversations. But I also realized something else. For the first time in my adult life, I had protected my family from manipulation by setting clear boundaries and refusing to be guilt-tripped into decisions that would harm our financial security. The price of that protection was going to be higher than I had anticipated. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Word about the restaurant incident had spread through our entire extended family network, creating ripple effects I hadn't anticipated. Some relatives were furious with me for abandoning family in crisis. Others were shocked to learn about Madison's manipulation and wanted to understand what had really happened. But the most important call came from my Uncle Phil, my father's older brother, who had always been the quiet, wise voice in family disputes. He asked if he could come over for coffee and a private conversation. "Rocco," Uncle Phil said as we sat in my kitchen, "I need to tell you something that might change how you feel about last night. Madison pulled the exact same scheme on me last year." He explained how Madison had organized a family reunion celebration, claiming that everyone was contributing equally to cover the costs. Uncle Phil, being a widower on a fixed retirement income, had been hesitant, but agreed to participate because he thought the financial burden was being shared. "She told me everyone else was paying $200 each, so I scraped together my portion," Uncle Phil continued. "But when we got to the event, I discovered that I was the only one who had been asked to contribute money. Madison had told everyone else that Uncle Phil was treating everyone as a gift to the family. I ended up paying over $3,000 for a party I couldn't afford just to avoid embarrassing everyone." The revelation was devastating. Madison's manipulation of our family wasn't a desperate response to my supposed promotion. It was a pattern of behavior that had been going on for years. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" I asked. "Because I was ashamed that I had been fooled, and I didn't want to cause family drama." But after what happened last night, I realized my silence enabled Madison to try the same thing on you. Uncle Phil's confession opened the floodgates. Over the next few days, other family members began sharing their own experiences with Madison's financial manipulation. Cousin Marcus revealed that she had convinced him to co-sign a car loan for her by claiming it was temporary and that she had money coming from a settlement that never materialized. Stephanie admitted that Madison had borrowed money for emergency medical bills that turned out to be cosmetic procedures she wanted but couldn't afford. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Madison had been systematically exploiting family relationships to fund a lifestyle she couldn't sustain on her and Trevor's actual income. But the most shocking discovery came when Dorothy called me 3 days after the restaurant incident. My mother had done some investigating of her own and uncovered something that explained everything. "Rocco, I found out why Madison was so desperate to establish that you were wealthy," she said with obvious distress in her voice. "She and Trevor are in serious financial trouble. They're 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. Their car is about to be repossessed, and they owe over $40,000 in credit card debt. The vacation she booked to Italy was paid for with cash advances that they have no way to repay." The truth was finally clear. Madison hadn't been trying to celebrate my success or bring the family together for a special evening. She had been facing financial ruin and had attempted to use my supposed promotion as a way to access money that could solve her crisis. "She was planning to ask you for a substantial loan after the dinner," Dorothy continued. "She thought if she could establish publicly that you were wealthy and successful, you'd feel obligated to help family members in need. The restaurant celebration was supposed to be the setup for a much larger financial request. Armed with this information, I made a decision that surprised even Sarah. I called Madison and arranged to meet her for coffee, just the two of us away from the rest of the family drama. When she arrived at the coffee shop, Madison looked exhausted and defeated. The confident, manipulative persona she had displayed at the restaurant was gone, replaced by someone who appeared genuinely desperate. "I suppose you heard about our financial situation?" she said quietly. "I heard some things, but I want to hear the truth from you." Over the next hour, Madison told me the real story. She and Trevor had been living beyond their means for years, using credit cards and loans to maintain an appearance of success that wasn't based in reality. When their financial house of cards began collapsing, she had become desperate for a solution. "When I heard rumors about your promotion, it seemed like the answer to our prayers," she admitted. "I thought if I could create a public celebration of your success, you'd feel good about yourself and want to share your good fortune with family. But Madison, you knew I didn't get promoted. Sarah told you directly. I knew there was a chance you were just being modest, or that the promotion might still be coming. I was desperate enough to gamble on it." For the first time since the restaurant incident, I felt genuine sympathy for my sister. She had made terrible choices and hurt people I cared about, but the underlying motivation was fear and desperation rather than pure selfishness. "What's going to happen now?" I asked. "We're probably going to lose the house. Trevor's already talking to a bankruptcy attorney. The Italy vacation deposits are gone, and we'll have to deal with the credit card companies about the cash advances. It's going to take years to recover from this mess." I made a decision that surprised both of us. "Madison, I can't solve your financial problems, but I can help you avoid making them worse. I'm going to loan you $1,500 so you can pay for your portion of the restaurant bill and avoid legal complications. But this comes with conditions." Her eyes filled with tears as I outlined my terms. The loan would be paid back in small monthly installments over 2 years. More importantly, she would need to be completely honest with the family about her financial situation and stop using manipulation tactics to extract money from relatives. "I also want you to attend financial counseling sessions and create a realistic budget based on your actual income," I continued. "And most importantly, you need to apologize to Uncle Phil and anyone else you've manipulated over the years." Madison agreed to all my conditions, and over the following months, she followed through on her commitments. The conversation with Uncle Phil was particularly difficult, but it began a process of healing that brought our family closer together. The restaurant incident became a turning point for our entire extended family. Instead of enabling Madison's continued manipulation, relatives began setting clear boundaries about financial assistance and requiring transparency about how money was being used. Frank and Dorothy initially struggled with my decision to leave the restaurant, but Uncle Phil's revelations about Madison's pattern of behavior helped them understand that I had been protecting the family from ongoing exploitation rather than abandoning them in crisis. Jake apologized for bringing his coworkers and creating additional pressure, acknowledging that he had been manipulated just like everyone else. Marcus and Stephanie learned to be more skeptical of financial opportunities that seemed too good to be true. But the most important change was in my own family's approach to money and relationships. Sarah and I used the experience as a teaching moment for Emma and Noah, explaining how people can sometimes use guilt and family pressure to make others feel obligated to do things they can't afford. "The lesson isn't that we don't help family," I told my children. "The lesson is that real help comes from honesty and respect, not from lies and manipulation." 6 months after the restaurant incident, something wonderful happened. I actually did receive a promotion at work, not to the senior position I had originally applied for, but to a project management role that came with a modest salary increase and better long-term career prospects. This time I handled the news differently. I told my immediate family privately and celebrated with a quiet dinner at a restaurant we could comfortably afford. When extended family members heard about the promotion, through normal conversation, they congratulated me without expecting anything in return. Madison, who was working through her financial recovery with the help of counseling and a strict budget, was among the first to offer genuine congratulations without any hidden agenda. Her marriage to Trevor survived the financial crisis, and they both found better jobs that allowed them to slowly rebuild their stability. The experience taught our entire family valuable lessons about the difference between authentic support and manipulation disguised as celebration. Real family loyalty doesn't require anyone to sacrifice their financial security or compromise their values. True generosity comes from choice, not from guilt or obligation. As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that the most valuable outcome wasn't just protecting my family's budget or exposing Madison's manipulation. It was learning to trust my own judgment and set boundaries that protected the people I cared about most. Emma and Noah learned that their father would always prioritize their family's well-being over temporary social pressure. Sarah learned that our partnership was strong enough to withstand criticism from people who didn't understand our values. And I learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to allow them to face the natural consequences of their choices. The restaurant bill was eventually settled through a combination of payment plans and family contributions that didn't involve me. Madison and Trevor paid their portion over 6 months. Jake covered his share with help from his employer credit union, and Marcus arranged financing through his bank. Everyone learned to take responsibility for their own financial decisions. A year later, our family gatherings were smaller but more genuine. Instead of elaborate celebrations designed to impress others, we focused on spending time together in ways that everyone could afford. The relationships that survived were stronger because they were based on honesty rather than financial obligation. And whenever someone in the family faced a real crisis, we were able to help them effectively because our resources weren't being drained by manipulation and artificial emergencies. The most satisfying moment came when Emma, now 7 years old, told me she was proud that I had done the right thing even when it was hard. Her understanding that integrity sometimes requires difficult choices gave me confidence that we had taught our children valuable lessons about character and responsibility. Looking back, I realized that the restaurant incident wasn't just about money or family drama. It was about learning to distinguish between authentic relationships and relationships based on exploitation. It was about protecting the people who depend on you most while still showing love for relatives who make poor choices. Most importantly, it was about understanding that real success isn't measured by how much you can spend on others, but by how well you can maintain your values under pressure and teach your children to do the same. The final lesson came from an unexpected source. Uncle Phil, who had initially been Madison's victim, became her strongest supporter during her recovery process. He understood that people can change when they face real consequences and receive appropriate support. The difference between helping someone and enabling them, Uncle Phil told me, is whether your assistance makes them stronger or just delays their need to grow up. That wisdom became the foundation for how Sarah and I approached all our relationships, both within the family and beyond. We learned to offer support in ways that encouraged responsibility rather than dependence, and to recognize when saying no was actually the kindest option. Have you ever been in a situation where family members expected you to pay for something you never agreed to? How did you handle the pressure to choose between your financial security and family relationships? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating family drama and protecting what matters most. Share this with someone who might benefit from learning about setting boundaries with relatives who don't respect financial limitations. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it helps you feel more confident about standing up for your family's well-being, even when it's difficult. Remember, the people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, and the ones who don't respect your boundaries might not love you in the healthy way you deserve.